Hey, everybody. So if you've listened to this show by now, you know that we talk to some folks who do some pretty wild things, right? We talk to a lot of people who live their lives doing police work, investigative work, all kinds of things that can be dangerous in the law enforcement universe. Well, our guest today on Deviant Off Script may actually kind of take the cake at this point for having some of the craziest stories. We interviewed a gentleman by the name of Scott Payne. And Scott Payne is a retired FBI agent and spent a large portion of his career diving into the corners of American criminal activity that I think a lot of us have a really deep-rooted fascination with. He would go into the corners of American criminal culture that very few of us have ever experienced. He infiltrated outlaw biker gangs. He infiltrated neo-Nazis. He infiltrated the KKK and armed militia groups and, extreme ideologies, the folks that live on the fringe. And he's now retired, but Scott is a fascinating story and a fascinating conversation. And not just because of the crazy stories, but because of what these kinds of things did to him, his psychology, and sort of the effect that they have on his family. He's a father, he's a husband. And so he had to deal with all of those things while trying to also maintain a family life. Scott puts all of this in his book, which is called Codename Pale Horse: How I Went Undercover to Expose America's Nazis. And so obviously we think you should read the book. It's an amazing read. And he's going to tell some of those stories on today's show. And so we broke this episode up into two parts because the conversation was so interesting and so long. We figured it was probably better served to come at you in two different pieces. So here it is, our conversation with Scott Payne, who is known as Pale Horse, Part 1. Scott Payne, if I had to find someone who kind of checks all the boxes of the things that I have always found fascinating in the criminal justice crime universe that I've found myself in for the last 20 years, I'm not sure I'd find somebody who checks all the boxes like you do. Author first, now an author, but a retired FBI agent, and spent the majority of your career undercover and infiltrating white supremacists, neo-Nazis, outlaw motorcycle gangs, leading SWAT teams, all those things. I'm going to stop talking now and just jump right in. Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man.
Before we get to some of the crazy stories, how did you get into the world of law enforcement and doing the things you've done in your life?
Well, through high school, I really found a love for psychology. So when I went to college, I really just went so I could get 4 more years to figure out what I was going to do with my life because I had no idea. So I played football at Charleston Southern University in South Carolina, and I was taking electives. My major was psychology for a while, and then I would take electives, and I came across a criminal justice course, and I really liked it. I love the criminology aspect, which ties in psychology, forensics, all that stuff. And towards the end of my college, like the last 2 years, I was already bouncing at bars, and I officially made it to a legit bar. And cops worked side jobs there. They were outside. So if we had to handle somebody and kick them out, well, the cops were there kind of waiting on them, at least on Friday and Saturday nights.
Yeah.
But I started getting more and more contact, and I was asking them questions, trying to be a sponge, and we were getting certified in pressure point control tactics, strikes, all that kind of stuff. And at first I thought I was going to be a lawyer, but that only lasted probably about a week or two because I realized I'd probably be terrible as a lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm like, if I was a defense attorney and they told me they did it, I'd probably be like, they did it. And if I was a prosecutor, I'd probably be screaming like Sam Kinison or something. But I went on a ride along, and I can't remember when I did it or who I did it with first, but man, that was it. I was hooked. And that's why I wanted to go into law enforcement. So I got out of college. The last 2 years, I had a 3.8 average. So I was on the dean's list playing NCAA football. And then I got out, and I guess at that time, I'd been 93. Yeah, like the summer of 93. But I eventually got hired at Greenville County Sheriff's Office. And I mean, my mentality has always kind of been like, even at a younger age, you get older, you look back and you can see it. But my mentality has always kind of been like a fan of the underdog, more of a shepherd mentality, bully of bullies, kind of serve and protect, a serving spirit, I guess.
Yeah.
And that played well into all that. And I went into law enforcement, and the first 3 years I was a uniform cop, learned a lot, loved it. And then I was able to make vice and narcotics investigator. And that's when I go to the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy and I get certified in undercover techniques and other courses. And that's when I started actually doing some street level, kind of quick drug buys, prostitution stuff. And I loved it. I think even before that point, I was fascinated with it. Like any cheesy 80s movie, a 90, if it was an undercover movie, I love them. I love them all.
Yeah.
And I'm not exactly sure why, other than it's not like, I mean, maybe there's a thrill to doing it by yourself as opposed to being on a team, even though it does take a team, but you're the one going in by yourself. And I just fell in love with it and kept growing with it. And then I went on to the FBI after that.
And we're going to get to some of those stories, but when it comes to undercover work, and we've talked to a bunch of folks that have done some of the similar work that you've done. We talked to a guy named Jay Dobbins. You probably know Jay at some point and have crossed paths with him.
We've exchanged emails, yeah.
Yeah. So Jay and I have talked at length about this. And the thing about undercover work that is so fascinating to me is because, like you said, there is a team involved, but that team is only going to be there for a certain amount of time before you have to operate alone.
Correct.
And so can you talk a little bit about when you first start doing that work and the first instances when you're alone and the team is in the van or waiting for you and you're like, I gotta do this alone. I'm by myself here.
At the sheriff's office, it's more street level stuff. So it's not, you're not like deep undercover. You're not fully backstopped because you can't get that at a county level. You can do your own kind of legend building and backstopping, but it only goes so far. For that, I say in the book, my first drug buy, I was like 270 pounds, 6'4", and I'm driving down to the drug corner to buy crack. I do not look like I smoke crack. And I was scared to death, man. I because I didn't even know what to do. I'd smoked weed and bought weed and all that kind of stuff in high school, but I'd never messed with crack or nothing. And
excuse me, sir, can I find some crack?
I'll be like, right off, my brother. How much would you charge a brother for that white powdery substance?
Right,
or
right.
That white rock-like substance you have.
Yeah.
Might I partake in that? But yeah, I rolled down, man. I had a 20 and my trainers, they were the narcs guys, and they were just, all you got to do is roll down there and say, I want a 20. Because it was just one rock. And I remember, man, I was so scared. I cracked the window. I was like shoving a $20 bill into a vending machine. I was so scared. And the guy, he even yelled at me. He said, roll down the window so he could hand me the crack. And then from there it goes on and on. Now, deep cover. So deep, like on this by a bus, you've got teams as well. But I can show you, I'm also a tactical guy in the firearms and SWAT and all that stuff. But man, I can show you video after video where the cover team is on the other side of the adjoining door of the hotel room. There's 2 rooms with an adjoining door. Bad guy comes in and gets 8 shots off before they can even get the door open. So we go in with not like a morbid thought, but you just need to know that if the crap hits the fan, it may be you and only you for a while. And they may be just coming to avenge your death. So you need to be prepared for that and think of things. Now, deep cover. Once I get in the FBI and I'm going deep cover, yeah, I mean, if you're out active, you should have a cover team. There was a case or two where I may have had a cover team, but not really. Like I'm on a lake. It's a 2-man office, 2-agent office, and I'm doing a weekend undercover, and I'm on the lake on party barges with potential bad people. And the cover agent is out with his family on the lake in his boat. That's not really cover. What are you going to do how do I even call you and say, you're not even listening to me? You don't even know what's going on. So that was early on until I got smarter and wiser, but you should have a cover team. But yeah, you're in there, you're on your own. Now you can have it where you have other undercovers, and Jay did this as well in his case. You've got other undercovers that come in with you, and maybe they're the secondaries and they're with you, and that helps. That's comforting to have a friendly face who's got your back kind of thing. But yeah, it could be very harrowing. And I've had a lot of harrowing experiences by myself.
You managed to infiltrate the Outlaws, which I think if you ask anybody in this country, name a motorcycle gang, the first one they say is Hell's Angels. The second one they say is the Outlaws, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Talk to me about the process of getting into and becoming a part of the Outlaws culturally. And honestly, for your life, leading, you're married and you've got a family. How are you juggling all of that? And what's the process of infiltrating that group?
First of all, I thought I was doing it pretty good. As time went on, I learned out I wasn't doing it that great. I was not juggling as well as I thought I was. But
Yeah.
a lot of times, law enforcement, you watch these cases and they'll do things where like they come in and hang around and you're a hang around with the club. And then you get to ingratiate and you start gaining trust in people. And then maybe you become a probate or a prospect, depending on which club, what they want to call it. But you're on a probationary status. And then generally it's a minimum of 6 months, no matter what. And it's like hazing. And then you may get your patch. And then once you're in, you got your patch. But what are you still doing? So trust me, man, my ego would have loved to have a patch. I would love to have a patch behind me right now. And I love the colors of the Outlaws. I'm like, if they're cut to this day, I'm not being biased because that's who I was around. I just think their colors are some of the coolest. But what we did and what we came up with, I came in with a plan of let me be me. Let me come in cold, which means no introduction at all. I'm just working like I'm just being me. I go to a bar, I start talking to people, I'm connecting with people, I'm telling jokes, and I can draw attention. I guess I'm a larger than average, depending on where you're at. I have been in the room where I was the shortest, 6'4", the shortest dude looking at everybody's nipples going, where do they grow you people at?
Right.
Like I'm going outside. I don't like this.
Yeah.
But you have you are, I guess, your brand, if you want to say it. You go in there and I can attract attention. So I went in and I started scouting out a bar that I knew they went to. And then when the night finally comes for them to show up and I'm ready, the team's ready, I have some things in place and I just tried to be me. And they had some really good intelligence on certain members of that chapter of the Outlaws. And there was one guy in particular that loved to be the center of attention, liked to be surrounded by big dudes. That's my guy. This guy's my guy. This is my guy. We bled together, that kind of thing. And I use that to my advantage and we set up a foundation for success. But as the case went on and they found out, look, I actually do criminal stuff, because what's this accent doing in Boston, Massachusetts? I go to a bar and I order a drink immediately. Where are you from? I'm like, where are you from?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Northeast. Where the F are you from? And I'm like, all right. So again, easier to get noticed. But eventually, as the case went on, I let it be known. And what they believed after I gained their trust is that I was a high-ranking member of an international theft ring. So it started with like them reporting vehicles stolen, them getting their insurance money, and then selling me the vehicles at a stolen price because I was based on the border of Mexico and McAllen, Texas. And I used real facts. It was very well known and common. If you don't know, just move down there, because my motorcycle insurance from New Jersey, I'm talking like the Hoboken area, right on the river at New York City, my motorcycle insurance, I think it was more than tripled when I went to McAllen. And I called USAA and I'm like, what is going on? And they're like, yeah, so Harley Davidsons get stolen a lot down there. And I'm like, oh. So I start talking to Texas Department of Public Safety and their investigators and their auto theft investigators. And it was well known that V8 4x4s and Harley Davidsons were stolen all the time. So I started kind of working that and then parlayed that into more stuff. And then after months and months and months, it's like, oh man, we just carjacked somebody. Tex was what they called me. And they're like, Tex, we just took off this guy. This car is hot. It is smoking hot. We took him at gunpoint, almost killed him, blah, blah, blah. Can you get rid of the vehicle? Absolutely. And then you gain more trust and then things keep going. So when it came to a point to where we could have done the regular MO of patching in, I argued against it. And I didn't know it at the time, but there were people on the case team that were arguing against it as well.
You mean
because
when you say argued against it, you mean internally amongst the rest of the FBI?
yes, the FBI,
Okay.
like me, and then one of the task force officers for sure.
Got it. Okay.
On our core case team, who said no, it's a bad idea. And the reason I said it was a bad idea is because right now we're getting what we want. And as much as I would love to patch in, here's the thing: if I'm a probate or a prospect, and I'm up here in Massachusetts, and they say, Tex, grab your shit, we're going to go jack this person. Can I say, I tell you what, you go do it, and then you bring me the vehicle and I get rid of it? No, because I'm a probate prospect. I got to go.
Right.
So
right.
it puts me in a worse area. Now, plenty of officers, law enforcement officers for the last 30, 40 years, I can't even imagine how many from state and local to federal have infiltrated biker clubs. Maybe not the big 1%ers, but have infiltrated biker clubs and gotten a patch. But how did the case turn out? So you go where it goes. Towards the end of the case, the idea was for me to move down to Florida and patch under the Southeast regional president at the time. And at that time, I said, hell yeah, I'm in. But I didn't realize, as I describe in the book, I didn't realize that I was already done physically and mentally. My body was shot from not just from that undercover. It was a cumulative effect of doing way too much for 3 years and not taking care of myself, not balancing my family. And I was done. My body said, you're done. And I had to take a break.
Before we get to that, and these are always fascinating conversations to hear people talk about how they live this life. And it's interesting hearing you say that patching in sort of was going to push you over a line that you were going to have a hard time coming back from, right? So strategically, it sounds like if I don't patch in, I can still sort of like stay on this side of the fence in some way. And we're still getting what we need, right?
It's a case-by-case basis, and it depends.
Yeah.
Had we not been, maybe I would have had to patch.
Right.
They asked me to. The president asked me, and it's on a recording. I'm in the clubhouse, and he's like, Tex, you just need to get a P.O. box. Grab you. We know you travel a lot, but just stay at this apartment when you're here, and we can patch you in. And I called him on some stuff, not trying to be a smart ass, but I pointed out, look, why would I subject myself to 6 months of this and have to stand on that side of the bar and not be able to drink? And then when I do drink, I got to pay when you got me in here drinking for free right now. And some of them are like, hey, well, I'm not trying to piss anybody off. I'm just saying. Plus, if I'm a traveler, I put that patch on my back, I'm now a target for law enforcement. It's kind of the thing.
Sure. So the thing that I'm always curious about is how you managed to do that. And then I guess figuratively and literally go home and kiss your wife and kids goodnight. Was there any ever concern? Do they follow you? Does the club, when you're not around, say, hey, what's Tex about? Like, why doesn't he want to patch in? Is there suspicion? Like, how do you manage not having your cover blown, I guess?
Well, for me and my belief system, I'm going to say I was covered. It's divine intervention. Because like my wife even says, before I retired, she goes, I don't know how you can be undercover. We'll fly somewhere we've never been. You can land in the airport and somebody comes up and goes, Scott, and I'm like, how in the hell did I work undercover for so long?
Yeah.
But there's a couple things on that. I did my homework. Texas is a bandito state. I was at the bottom of Texas. That was bandito territory. Banditos and outlaws didn't get along. So is there a chance that the outlaws could send some people down there and pop up and say, hey, where you at? I'm traveling. Well, when are you going to be back in McAllen? I'll be here whenever. All right, we'll be here. I had some stuff set up in case of an emergency, but I set it up. It wasn't like the FBI set it up. I just had it set up with a friend of a friend who had a furnished apartment kind of thing. And I had go bags really. If I had to, if it was last minute, hey, and I had to run over and throw pictures up and shit like that, then it was doable. But yeah, so the coming home and changing, it's tough. And I was early on in my career, it was tougher or more tough. I had to type it in and get it right. It wasn't easy. We'll just change it. It wasn't easy. Yeah. And I thought I was doing good, like I said, but I really wasn't. I was a zombie there during that 3-year period, especially towards the end. Doing the book, we had to dive back in. Me and my wife had to dive back into some bad times. And that wasn't easy. But I learned stuff that I didn't even know. I'm like, holy crap, I was a zombie. She was just trying to keep me stress-free. Like I was so burned out from working so much, and not just undercover, SWAT, everything else I was doing, running my own cases, being the head relief supervisor of the squad and all kinds of stuff. I would just come home and veg. But did I start getting a little more anger outbursts? Yeah. Was I hanging around a lot more violent people that I'm being transparent. I can be violent, and I enjoyed that crowd. It reminded me of just being at football camp. It's just a bunch of testosterone doing stupid stuff, man. It's like, hey, you ever seen this move? No. Ow, that hurt. You know what? I like this one. Next thing you know, we're fighting, wrestling over tables, knocking stuff over, people getting their fingers broke, stuff like that. So it wasn't as easy in the beginning, but I got better at it as time went on. I had to get better at it, or I would needed to stop.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about you're running with these guys and talking about selling stolen cars and patching into the biker gang, and then you go home at night and your wife wants to talk about, oh, hey, Brenda down the street's having a cookout this weekend. I told her we could go. Like, how do you're like, my day was a little more intense than that. Like, and it's not her fault, right? It's not your wife's fault, but it's just you guys are living two different worlds under the same roof.
True, but it did help that my undercover that I was doing was not close to home. So when I land in that airport, I go out and I get in Scott Payne's FBI vehicle or whatever, and then I drive home and I take that skull off and I put my cross back on my necklace, and now I'm back to being, well, I say I'm back to being case agent and husband and all that stuff, but I wasn't doing it as good as I thought I was. But it can definitely get muddy, especially the more you travel. And I can't remember which case it was. It might have been that one where I came home and I didn't take the skull off, and it had been a couple of days. And my wife called me on it. She goes, how come you don't have your cross on? And I was like, oh, well, I'm like, yeah, I forgot. I'm so busy. I'm getting ready to head back. But did I really forget? But yeah, you got to look at my background too. I am a biker. I can show you my narcotics squad. We're at Myrtle Beach Bike Week, spring and fall, every year, where I bounced in college. The Hells Angels were at all the time. They helped me a bunch because one of the places I bounced at was a strip club, and it was just two bouncers for the whole place. So you got 2 to 3 bachelor parties in there of 10 to 15 people. Well, it's not hard math to figure out you're not going to win against that many people. And so I was familiar with it and fascinated with it. And I read up every major biker book you could get, Sonny Barger's book. What is it? 3 Can Keep a Secret If 2 Are Dead, Into the Abyss, all those things. I read
Mel Chancey, right?
Yep. I read them all.
It sounds like sort of there's a fine line between Scott Payne, the FBI agent, and Tex, the guy who's working with the Outlaws.
Very similar.
You've got the tats, you ride bikes. Scott has the tats, Scott rides the bikes. But so I guess my question is, where did you make the decision to say, I'm going to go this way when others went the other way?
I'm trying to think if there's a pivotal moment growing up, but I definitely could have been. I mean, definitely that proverbial fork in the road, I could have easily been an outlaw, easily, or a Hell's Angel. I could have done that, absolutely. But maybe my morals, my values, people praying over me, and I'm a realist. Once I got into school, I focused on that law enforcement bit, and when I got out of college, that's what I went with. When I could have been like, I had a chance to play football. I had to go try out anyway. I had a chance to continue on being a musician and singer. I had a chance to start because I was getting recruited for some smaller professional wrestling promotions. But I had my college degree, and I'm a realist. So I was like, hey, this is more real. That's what happened there. But it did help me identify. And it's helped me throughout my whole career. I've said on plenty of interviews, look, man, if I arrest somebody almost all the time, maybe short of a pedophile, I'd be like, look, I'm not saying I disagree with what you did. I'm not saying I think you're a bad person. I'm saying you're an adult and you chose to break the law and you got caught. And we're here right now. I'm not judging you. I committed all kinds of crimes before I became a cop. And I told them. And I'm like, I didn't get arrested. or convicted. Had I been, I would never be able to be a federal agent. But yeah, I could have easily been on that side. And I'm a second chance guy. It's my belief system.
Yeah.
It's the way my heart is. It's the way I'm wired. If it wasn't for second, third, hell, 14 chances, I wouldn't be where I'm at. So that's helped me.
Yeah, and I'm sure that sort of psychology and that thinking probably was a huge benefit to connecting with and being undercover and dealing with the guys in the biker gangs, right? You saw them as people who had made a decision in life to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah. You weren't looking at them necessarily as these guys are all targets of my investigation necessarily, but that helps you and relationships, right? And developing relationships and connecting with them.
Exactly. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to gain trust and ingratiate and find out, are they actually committing crimes and we're gathering evidence, or are they not? Because there's been plenty of undercovers I've done where you're in there for 5 months or more and there's nothing here. You know, you're like, hey, I've gone out, we've shot guns, we've talked all this stuff. They are not doing any acts in furtherance of a criminal act. They're not doing what we call overt acts and moving forward. Then it's time for me as the undercover to pull out, and then the case team can figure out what they want to do.
I want to ask you about when you had gotten into the Outlaws and when those harrowing experiences of where you almost had your cover blown. Mm-hmm. You talk in the book about wearing a wire and going into the basement. Can you tell our listeners that story of almost having your cover blown and how you react to that and how you handle that?
The reaction is scared. I had been undercover for 1.5 years at that point.
And when was that? What year was this?
We're talking like 2006 to 2008, somewhere in there.
Gotcha.
I think maybe like July of 2005 is when I went in the beginning. But I'd been undercover for 1.5 years at that point, done all kinds of stuff. I'd moved stolen vehicles. Like in the beginning, it was insurance fraud. Then it was carjackings. Then it was straight up theft, like just popping the steering wheel and pulling up in a brand spanking new quad cab F-350, and we're pulling it onto a semi truck. And I've done all kinds of stuff like that. And I can't remember if that point, I think already in that investigation, by that point, there had been a murder. We didn't never really have enough to pin it on who did it, but it was pretty evident that the Outlaws murdered a Hells Angels president in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And then in retaliation for that, the Outlaws come to Sturgis, which Hells Angels has their clubhouse on the main strip, show up in Sturgis. And the day I flew in, 5 outlaws, it was 2 patch members, a probate, and then 2 old ladies shot at point blank range by Hells Angels from Canada, I believe. And I'm talking like crushed clavicles, paralyzed from the waist down. It was pretty serious. So you had all that going on. But again, I'm calling, the case team's running a wiretap. I'm dirtying up. I'm calling and going, hey man, what's going on? Hey Tex, if you come out here, you need to lay low. It's hot right now. Well, if I come, can you give me a vest? Because I don't want to pack one, you know what I mean? On the airplane. Yeah, we got you covered, that kind of thing. So now we're up in the ante. We've gotten a lot of evidence, but from day one, and the case team had already built this evidence to open the case and work it anyway before I ever even got involved. But they had evidence of drug transactions, multiple, and this, that, and the other. And from the first day I got there and I met the president, as soon as he found out I was on the border of Mexico, he's like, how much can you get a kilo of cocaine for? And it was just like that quick. So now at 1.5 years in, I won't say how, I won't do it as long as it took, but you got to lay breadcrumbs. Yeah. It's just let them figure out. And it eventually came out that they knew I was involved with the cartel anyway, because I had truck drivers that could come in and out of Mexico without being stopped at the port of entry or the checkpoint. They knew that I was dealing with the cartel. And then I let it be known that, yes, I did used to be in the dope game, and that I backed out of it because heat was getting a little too close. So that was at the behest of the repeated requests from outlaw members of, man, you need to hook us up with a pipeline kind of thing, a connect, because as a drug dealer, what do you want? You want the purest quality dope you can get for the cheapest price you can get. That means you can make more money on your end by stomping on it, stepping on it, whatever you want to call it, diluting it, and then sending it out to double your money or triple your money maybe. So we laid out this elaborate plan, let them figure it out. I used to be involved. The cartel needs to bring a dope shipment through, and they're not taking it into Canada. I'm not letting my truck drivers take it to Canada because they lost their contacts at the port of entry. And I'm like, unless you can guarantee the safety for my truck drivers, I'm not letting them go. So now we've laid all this out, and we're getting ready to do this drug shipment where they're going to help unload it and move it to another truck, and they're going to help make sure it doesn't get ripped by providing security. And that allows the people who've been requesting to meet my cartel contact and stuff like that. So we had 40 kilos of real cocaine and 1,000 pounds of weed, real. So you can imagine the Boston field office, Boston division, their SWAT team is all involved in this. I've already gone in there and, hey, this is me, don't shoot me kind of thing. But you're going to have snipers up on the rooftops and stuff like that because we can't let 40 kilos disappear and go out in the street. So the night before, I went to the club. I was told, hey, man, come to the clubhouse. I said, okay. But for the listeners that don't know, especially in the 1%er world, usually your biker clubs have a mandatory meeting every week. They refer to that mandatory meeting as church. Yeah. So they were having church, and they told me to come. I think it might have been like a Wednesday night. And yeah, I think it was a Wednesday. So I get there, and a weird transaction happens at the door. They're not coming. I'm knocking on the door. Then the president, Joe Dogs, cracks the door and kind of looks like, hey, we're not ready yet. And I'm like, well, why'd you have me come? The hell did you tell me to come over here for? I didn't think nothing of it. And I went to grab something to eat, a drink, came back, waited, and then I go in. Well, for the ones that don't know, I'm not a patch member. So technically, at least in that clubhouse, I'm not allowed to touch the door. You walk in, they lock the door. Deadbolts, steel frame door, metal bar across the door into welded hooks that are on the door to fortify from getting in. And then I'm having a drink or two and I'm doing my shtick. I'm like, hey man, I'm laughing. I'm being me. That's not a shtick. It's just me. I'm telling jokes. We're laughing. We're cutting up. And what I couldn't see, because I would turn, but my recording device picked it up, and I watched it later. But I couldn't see that as I'm cracking a joke and you're laughing. You're like, yeah, that's funny, Tex. That's funny. When I turned my head, it was like they were just like stone faced, because the whole church meeting was about bringing me in and checking me. What we found out is that it had gone up to the top of the Outlaws, that Taunton, Massachusetts Outlaws chapter was going to be doing this deal with me, which kind of goes against the whole, we're not an organization. Nobody knows what the other one's doing, right? Something, how the hell does the top know and send it back down that I need to be checked? And the second closest relationship I'd probably built in that year and a half time was the enforcer clothesline. And he comes up to me and he says, hey, Tex, you got a minute? And I said, yeah. And I'd been in that clubhouse, I don't know, man, 20 times, who knows, a bunch. There's only one door I'd never gone in, and that's the door we went in. And it was a very tight stairwell. And you walk down the stairs, and to call it the basement would be generous, because I couldn't stand up straight. I was leaning over like this because it's so short down there. And I could probably touch the wall on both sides. So I'm in there, and when we get down there, clothesline tells me, hey, there's a lot of shit going on. It's my job to take care of everybody, because he's the enforcer. He said, I need you to write down your full name, date of birth, address, all of it. Write it all down, and then I need you to take all your clothes off because I got to check you for a wire. The problem was I was wired to the hilt, because I'm a year and a half in. I've gained trust, and the United States Attorney's Office is wanting, and the case team and me, we're wanting to gather evidence. So if there are people in that clubhouse and they're saying, okay, where am I going to park on Monday, and what am I going to do, or whatever, tomorrow, how are we going to do this, or we're going to have radio, just to show that, hey, you're talking about it. I'm not making you do it. You want to do it, and it's gathering evidence. So I went in there wired to the hilt, and so I get down there, and then the oh crap moment happens, because I realized walking down the steps, this is not good, because Close Eyes in front of me, and then Chocolate Scott walks in behind me, and the door shuts. Well, they brandish their pistols to show me they're armed, and I'm not free to leave. And Chocolate Scott's on the stairwell with he's just hanging, kind of looking, and I'm not free to leave. So I start to write my information down. and I'm having that old crap adrenaline dump. My voice gets tighter and higher. The pitch is higher. My enunciation gets worse. And if anybody's ever had an adrenaline dump, it can be just from a car wreck, something traumatic. Everything slows down in time.
Yeah.
You get auditory exclusion. Everything sounds like you're underwater. It's going whoosh, 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 real slow. What could be 2 minutes feels like it's an hour, right? When you look, everything's in clicks. It's time dilation. It's like click, click. You're taking like snapshots. You can feel your heart beating. Your hamstrings get weak. That's an adrenaline dump. And as I was writing down my information, I forgot my middle name because of the stress. And I know this character. It's me. I built it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been it for a long time. And
Is Clothesline seeing this too?
I don't know. Apparently, I'm pulling it off because I'm leaning over on a notepad and I'm writing it down. And I don't even realize I do it, Andrew. I'm like, I look and I go, I say, and what else do you need? Because it sounds like this. He goes, what else do you need? And it's all high. And he's like, what? And I said, my name and what else? I never knew I did that. That's a distraction technique. I was just buying time. And then I hear them yell up upstairs to a probate. Hey, what do you need for that website? So now I know, okay, I'm gathering intelligence. I'm active listening. I'm still trying to work this thing because it's a chess game. You're trying to stay 4 moves ahead of your target, right? And I'm like, okay, so they're going to who'sarat.com me, which is a big thing back then. They're going to Google me. Okay, that's cool. I can pass all that. And then I finally remember my middle name was Andrew, your name, right? because my initials were SAC, which is usually the head of a FBI office. And I did that just for giggles because I knew I'd never be an SAC.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I write that down and then now I'm taking all my clothes off. But the whole time I'm still talking or I'm trying to. And I'm looking at Clothesline. He's supposed to be my friend. And I'm like, my face is basically saying, tell me I'm okay. And his response back to me, even though he was saying some stuff, it was kind of like, hey, you're all right. But he didn't know I was really an FBI undercover wired to the hilt. So
it's nonverbal communication between the two of you.
Yeah. And I'm like, like reading facial communication, but I might be saying, hey, man, look, I might be saying, look, I don't know what this is. There ain't nobody got to do nothing. And he's like, trust me, man, if somebody accused me of being a Fed, I'd probably smash him in the effing mouth. And I said, I'm not happy. And he goes, I wouldn't be either. And he said, there's just a lot going on. And I've got my doubts myself. And I said, then why are we doing it? Nobody has to do it. I'm like, if nobody wants to do shit, we ain't got to do shit. I'm like, why do you? And I didn't come to you guys. Y'all called me over. I'm not trying this whole entrapment thing. And I'm like, no. I'm like, you're a criminal doing criminal stuff, and now you want to make money off of me. I never entrapped you, which is why everybody pled guilty. But
yeah,
I'm saying that while I'm taking all my clothes off. I take all my upper clothing off. I take my boots off, and I drop my pants and my jeans and underwear down around my ankles. So from ankle up, butt naked. And he's checking me. He checks everything. He even checks the skull on my necklace. And I'm still trying to talk. And the man, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, look, I know you guys are concerned because there's a lot at risk. And I just got out of jail and we don't want people going to jail. And I'm like, yeah, I hear you. But you guys are worried about going to jail if this goes wrong. I said, I'm dealing with the cartel. And what I spoke was the truth. I'm like, if I screw this up, I don't know if you know how the cartel works. Because I did as an FBI agent, because that's what I worked for 6.5 years on the border. I'm like, not only do
your
they
head
kill
will be
me,
on spike.
Yeah, they torture me, they torture my family, they torture my animals, my kid. I'm like, no. So I reiterated what was real, and then he finishes patting me down, and I think I'm done, and I pull my britches up, and I think I'm putting my boots on, and then he grabs a piece of clothing. And he says, hey, I'm not going to find anything in here I don't want to, like some naked pictures of my old lady. And he giggles. And my giggle is more like a, because the piece of clothing he got has a recording device in it. And we're talking 2007-ish, so clearly technology is better now. But if he starts kneading it with his fingers and going down it, and I don't even know I do it. I know it because I've seen the recording of the video hundreds of times now. But I'm watching him because there's nothing I can do. If I start fighting, okay, I've already seen rope. They've got pistols. I didn't see plastic on the floor. Had I seen that, I might have tried to fight my way out, because to me, in that world, in a basement, plastic on the floor means I'm going to get killed. And that means that's just so they don't bloody up everything. But he's needing this piece of clothing, and you hear an audible sigh out of me. I'm watching it, and all you hear me do is go, again, I don't know how I do it. That's just what I'm feeling, and it's coming out. And he misses it. He looks right at it, misses it by the grace of God, and then it's right to business. He's like, okay, man. So, and I'm like, are we good? And he's like, yeah, we're good. And I go, can you hug me? And he's, yeah. So we hugged, and I'm a jokester anyway.
Yeah.
But it's also a self-defense mechanism, right? I'm panicking. I'm crapping gold bricks. But I say, well, at least I didn't wear white underwear or something like that. I'm glad I'm wearing colored boxer briefs. But then that adrenaline dump starts coming down, and then I just get pissed. And I live to fight another day. But what's amazing about that is people always ask is, man, what would you have said had he found it?
Yeah.
And I only had two responses. My first response, because he already threw me a bone and said, I'm not going to find any pictures of my naked pictures of my old lady. If he would have said, what is this? I probably would have thrown a joke and said, I don't know, some naked pictures of your old lady, to see if it could buy me time or to get him off of it. The only other thing I had to say, Drew, was, and I remember it like it was yesterday, I've said this, and I don't know how many interviews or how many times I've taught it. I would have said, the gig is up. I'm an undercover FBI agent. I can walk out of here and we can see each other in court, or all hell's going to break loose. But that would have been a bluff on my part, because to my knowledge, every time I'd been in that clubhouse, whether it was the walls or the neighborhood or whatever, the case team couldn't really hear me. So even though I had a transmitter device in that day and age, as far as I knew, they couldn't hear me. So if I would have said that, it would have been a bluff. So let's get through the end of the night. I then go out with the guy I was the closest with, Scott Payne, and the president, Joe Dogs. And by that time, I'm unloading. I took it personal. I shouldn't have. I'm Scott Payne, an FBI agent undercover, but I'm human, and it pissed me off. And I'm also coming down from adrenaline, and I'm like, who do you think you are taking me in the basement and stripping me? I'll tell you what, tomorrow, if y'all show up, I'm making all y'all get naked in the damn parking lot, and it's going to be cold, whatever. They let me vent. But that night when I went to meet the cover team at an undisclosed location, freezing our tails off, I go to hand in my recording equipment. And what I find out is that the two task force officers on the core team, it was a detective from Brockton PD, a sergeant with the Massachusetts State Troopers, and then it was a case agent with the FBI. But the task force officer started that shift. They had been in that clubhouse on local stuff, investigations or whatever. So they knew how the door was and stuff. And when I first went to that door and that exchange I had with Joe Dogs, it raised their spidey senses, and they were like, something's not right. And they had pulled close enough. They heard everything. They were radioing back to Boston going, damn it, they got Scott in the basement. They're stripping him, and he is wired to the hilt. To what they told me is everybody that was going to be working the shift is leaving the Boston office, coming down the highway, blue lights and siren, trying to get to me. And Joe and Higgy, the task force officers, had suited up. They put their vest on. They already had their guns and everything. Their plan was to drive the van that they were in into the cinder block wall right beside the door, because they knew the door was heavily fortified and they didn't have a lot of breaching equipment and stuff. But they didn't pull the trigger. They listened to me. They had known me at least for a year and a half. They knew my baseline. Clearly, they could hear I was scared. But they also were listening to Clothesline, and they were listening to the exchange, and they never pulled the trigger. They were ready, and they didn't pull the trigger. Now, I'm not saying that to say that the case is worth more than an officer's life, because there's no case worth an officer's life. Now, I'm not talking about the oath I took, and if it's an active shooter, I'm going straight to that threat to stop the killing. That is an oath I took. I'm talking about being undercover and not break and roll and die. It's not worth it. And they didn't pull the trigger. And when I found out that, I was like, holy crap, man. And I didn't know. And they were like, are you okay? This, that, and the other. Well, during that case and that time of my marriage, my daughters were really young. I had a newborn, maybe a year old, and then her older sister. But I always called my wife no matter what time I finished at the night. I bought her a burner phone. They weren't well known back then, but they are now. You just go to Walmart, pay by the minute, put whatever fake name you want. It doesn't matter. They're not checking. So I called her that night and I said, hey, I was just calling to say, hey, I'm done. I'm on my way back to the hotel. I'm crash out. I'll call you when I wake up later today, kind of thing. And when I called her that night, the first thing she said was, are you okay? Yeah. And I said, yeah, why? And she said, at such and such time, I was driving with our girls in the car in McAllen, and she got this overwhelming feeling, and she pulled over on the side of the road and started praying for me. And I mashed it up, and it's when I was in the basement getting stripped at gunpoint.
Oh man,
pretty strong, pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, she just knew.
Yeah, apparently my oh shit signal's pretty was pretty strong.
Can cross multiple states apparently.
Many. Yeah.
So how long between that and you getting out of undercover work? What's the timeline, and when do you come to the kind of the crossroads of this isn't sustainable?
Well, I continued, so I had to take a break, but I found let me. So this is how the case went.
Go for it. Yeah,
I crashed. We were in Daytona Beach at a World Run. I was trusted enough at that point, not a patch member, and the Southeast Regional President is pulling. Hey, park your bike right here in front of the clubhouse, and just realize Taunton may know me, Brockton may know me, a few people from Maine, maybe Detroit may know me, maybe a couple in Jacksonville know me. But when you go to a new place where new outlaws are at, I've stood 10 feet away from a president pointing right at me saying, who the F is that guy? And what the F is he doing here? And how the hell did he get to Boston? And you have to know your story. You have to explain everything. So by that time, Hillbilly was the Southeast Regional President, and he saw me and he's like, Tex, backing in right here. And I backed right in front of the front door. There's motorcycles everywhere. There's outlaws from all over the world there. And he walks me in through a sea of leather and testosterone, and not the Blue Oyster, whatever kind from the police academy, but outlaws. There's a lot of butt sniffing going on. I can tell you that. Who are you? How much you bench press? Okay. Oh, can you fight? That kind of thing. So I walked to the bar, and Hillbilly's give him whatever he wants. He's a friend, and I'll give me 2 double Jack and Cokes or 2 Jack and Cokes, whatever. Then he takes me out to the tented area out back, and to my knowledge, and to the case team's knowledge, only patch members can go there. And then they start talking in very shitty code, kind of about the murder of the Hells Angel president in Connecticut. So when we do the debrief that night with the Jacksonville FBI case team and the Boston case team, that's when the Jacksonville case agent was like, man, we've had sources, we've got people. Hillbilly does not talk like this around them. He does. You've got trust for this guy. What do you say? Because he said, Boston, where are you at in your investigation? They said, we pretty much accomplished everything we need to.
Yeah.
They said, what do you say? You don't take your case down. Well, Scott, you come down to Florida and try to patch under Hillbilly. And of course I said, yeah, like I said earlier, but I went to get on the plane to fly back to McAllen, and I was out, wheels up to wheels down. I'd actually had a panic attack in the hotel room that week in Daytona. By that time I was a zombie, man. I was on antihistamines, decongestants, inhalers. I was taking hydroxycuts, anything with ephedrine in it. I was drinking the strongest cups of coffee I can make, and that was just to get out of bed. So I had a panic attack, and instead of realizing, bro, you need to chill, let's go get a nap, pull out of this, go home, take a break, I kept going. I did take a nap, but I woke up and went back out, started pouring some Jack and Cokes, and I figured I'd just self-medicate and work my way through it. So I get home and I crash. I sleep. Probably the first day I might have slept close to 20 hours, maybe even close to 20 hours the second day. But for 5 days, over 16 or more hours a day, I was sleeping. And it wasn't depression. It wasn't being sick. I know what they feel like. I was that tired. And by that Friday morning, a former buddy of mine, well, he's still a buddy of mine. I don't know if I'm a buddy of his, but one of the best undercovers I've ever known. He called me to talk. It was really to call me about another biker undercover that might be brewing. And he asked me, he said, hey, Country, how you doing? And because my nickname was Big Country in the bureau. And I told him not too well. And about an hour later, he had taken me in a circle and let me convince myself, or help convince me, that I needed to call our safeguard unit, which is for psychological assessments of undercovers. And I told him, I'm like, hey, man, I don't know what's going on. I think I'm crashing. So they came down about 2 or 3 weeks later, did a on-site assessment, and they diagnosed me as over-assigned. And they said I wasn't allowed to go back face-to-face on the undercover, but I could help finish it on the phone. So for the next month or two, maybe 3 months, I came up with a story, told them that, hey, I'm getting a divorce, but I got to relocate my wife and the kids to El Paso to her family. And if I don't do that, I won't be able to look at myself in the mirror. But trust me, brothers, as soon as I get them there, my ass is coming to Massachusetts. I'm sick of this hot weather. And that's the way I did it. And there was one last scraggler that had gotten out of prison, and I met before I got put on timeout. And he told me, he said, hey, he met me and he knew that I'd done dope and stuff. So while I was in McAllen, he called me and he's like, hey, if you can get me 10 kilos, if you can get me a kilogram of cocaine at 18,000 a piece, I can buy 10 of them right now. And he had a Hummer. He wanted to sell me a Hummer 2, H2, and then like a $100,000 BMW and some other stuff. So I called the case team and said, do you want to follow through on this? And they said, yeah. So I set up the deal. The guy that had been posing as my truck driver through the case drove up there. Another undercover hopped in with him. And I'm even on the phone brokering the deal while they're there meeting him, even though I'm in my garage in McAllen, Texas. And then when they went to load the vehicles, as I understand it, he pitched them for the 10 kilos. And they said yes, and that's how they ended the case. They went, and when he thought he was picking up 10 kilos of cocaine, he got arrested, and that was the beginning of the takedown.
It's interesting that the FBI has a unit that's, obviously devoted to making sure that you guys are still being as effective as you can be. Mm-hmm. So they say to you that you're overassigned. Mm-hmm. And it's up to you to figure out what the exit strategy is on the actual undercover side.
Yeah, really the case team.
Because you can't just disappear, obviously.
No.
Right.
That was the argument. I said, well, man,
right.
Let me at least call. And they're like, okay, so you can call on the phone. And that's what I did. It's a minimum timeout of 6 months. And it just means you're not recommended. They call it DNR, do not recommend. And that means they do not recommend me to continue the case or any undercover. Yeah. And I needed it. I needed the break. But yeah, we finished it up there. And then I went back to being a case agent and just recouping and trying to figure out how in the hell I got there. Could I ever get back to being who I was before? I didn't know if I was having a nervous breakdown or what.
So I told you at the top this was going to be an interesting conversation. And I think that the last 45 to 50 minutes have kind of proven that to be true. And the best part is we have a whole nother episode coming next week, which is the rest of our conversation with Scott Payne. But before we go, I cannot suggest enough that if this is the kind of thing that's interesting to you, talking and hearing from people who have found themselves in these corners of American life that so many of us don't understand or don't have any familiarity with, you've got to go get his book at Amazon or wherever books are sold. It's called Codename Pale Horse, and it is a extremely detailed account of this and so many more stories from his time in the FBI and in law enforcement. So I hope you enjoyed part 1, part 2 next week. Until then, we'll talk to you later.